Hey everyone, my name is Wedge. If you've been following our deck tech series lately, you may have noticed something. All those decks seem pretty expensive. Yeah, standard decks have a habit of doing that. So something we like to do every now and then is bring you budget lists, decks you can build on a budget of around $40. Normally we build these decks ourselves, but we saved ourselves some work this time around. This is Blue-White Heroic, a deck that Tom Ross just played to third place in the standard SCG Open this weekend. Exactly as given, the land base is pretty expensive, but if we get a little creative there, the rest of the deck is actually pretty cheap right now. Let's dive right in. In case you missed it during Theros block, Heroic is a mechanic where creatures will get special bonuses whenever you cast a spell that targets them. That includes both aura enchantments and buff spells like God's Willing and Defiant Strike. Psst, guess what two of the cards on the list are? So this deck runs a small number of lands and around 40 cards split between small creatures with efficient heroic abilities and cheap spells to trigger heroic. The objective is to make one guy big and evasive, then swing in for a ton. We had to make some changes here from the list we saw because, as I mentioned earlier, that land base was pretty expensive. We start with the basics, literally. 10 plains and 4 island. White is by far the main color in the deck, but the blue cards are there for a reason, because they're still really good. So being able to cast both always helps. We've got 8 lands here that can tap for white or blue. Unfortunately, since we can't afford Flooded Strands or Mana Confluences on a $40 budget, they're all slow sources. We found that wasn't too much of a hindrance, but if you disagree, your only on-budget option is more basics. Temple of Enlightenment is a bit pricey, but our creatures and spells are cheap enough that we can fit in 3. 4 Tranquil Cove are easy to throw in. Turns out that when they put dual lands a common, everyone wins. That last slot is a Mystic Monastery, just ignore the red mana symbol. Monastery is here because it's inexpensive and taps for white and blue. We don't particularly care that it also happens to tap for a third color. In total, we have 22 lands. Now on to creatures. Favored Hoplite is a great 1-drop for us, since you can just put him down on turn 1 and start suiting him up as soon as he can attack. He also protects himself in combat or from burn spells. We run a playset. Our turn 2 options are every bit as solid and then some. Our key 2-drop is Hero of Iroas. Not only is he a bear that grows, he also makes it cheaper to enchant our creatures. 4 Battlewise Hoplite let us filter our draws while we build them up. This will get more important as the game goes on. You generally don't want to draw any more land once you have about 4 or 5 down. Seeker of the Way is in here as a 3 of. Seeker does a lot for us against aggressive decks. It's especially helpful that he has prowess and not heroic. Because of that, he gets bigger and gains this life even when we just put spells and auras on our heroic creatures. The downside is that his boosts are only temporary, but given the circumstances, that's pretty serviceable. Our 3 drops, of which there are a total of 5, are more for support. None of them actually have heroic, but they all have very helpful abilities. We run 2 Eidolon of Countless Battles. Technically a 3-drop, and that his converted mana cost is 3, however the real reason he's here is to be bestowed onto our heroic creatures. With the Hero of Iroas out, it still only costs 3 to bestow him. And remember, cost reductions stack with multiple Hero of Iroas. We only run 2 Eidolons because he's a bit slow at 3 to 4 mana, and this deck isn't all in on auras, giving him fewer things to grow from. Rounding out our 19 creatures is our other 3-drop Heliod's Pilgrim as a 3 of. The card was actually printed in M15, but looking at the effect, you'd never guess it. She fits this heavily Theros-based deck like a glove. In particular, she allows us to run several 1-ofs in our enchantment package and still reliably have access to whichever of them we need. Unfortunately though, since bestow creatures only become auras as you cast them, she can't fetch us our Eidolons. Speaking of enchantments, this is what our enchantment package looks like. Our only 4 of is Ordeal of Thassa. This is because card draw is something we want badly. Note that the Ordeals just look for +1/+1 counters before they sacrifice themselves. They don't care where those counters came from. Since all of our heroic creatures get counters when targeted, it'll virtually never take you the full 3 attacks to sacrifice an Ordeal. Our other 4 enchantments are all 1-of auras. Like with Seeker of the Way, Ordeal of Heliod gives us a way to get an attrition advantage over aggro decks. Aqueous Form and Stratus Walk give your chosen hero evasion. Usually you'll want to favor Stratus Walk if you have a choice, since it draws you a card to replace itself when you cast it. However, flying and reaching creatures aren't uncommon in this standard, so sometimes you need Aqueous Form to ensure you can get there during combat. You want to avoid running into your opponent's creatures at all costs and deal 20 to their dome as quickly as possible. Singing Bellstrike also helps with that. By keeping a creature tapped, you remove a blocker or an aggressive threat. Keep in mind that Hero of Iroas reduces the cost of all of your auras regardless of what they target, so with a hero out, Singing Bellstrike only costs 1 blue. That's efficient removal. The last 10 cards in the deck are all instants. 4 God's Willing and 2 Feet of Resistance serve a variety of purposes. If you need to get through blockers, you can just give your creature protection from their color. They essentially negate targeted removal. If you need to push through for 1 or 2 more points, they can trigger Heroic to grow your creature. They also have their own benefits. Feat of Resistance makes your creature even bigger by giving it an extra counter, while God's Willing lets you scry, which is strong in this deck. Lastly, we have 4 Defiant Strike. It targets, so it triggers Heroic. It gives our creatures another temporary power boost on top of that, and it draws a card to replace itself. Defiant Strike is the full package for this deck, or at least something close to it. That wraps up the main deck. Let's talk matchup and sideboard. Now, we don't usually give specific sideboards since everyone's local meta is different and you'll want to change this up depending on what you see. However, the sideboard we found with this deck just about fits into our budget and gives some really good talking points. Against aggressive decks, your biggest problem is going to be getting outraced. Sure, all of our creatures are small and cheap, but it takes several turns to build them up. If we can get there, we just decide not to care about their creatures because we've built stone walls out of ours. The problem is getting there. Key cards in this matchup are Ordeal of Heliod and Seeker of the Way. Running an extra of each gives you that much more endurance against the early onslaught. This sideboard also includes 2 Lagonna-Band Trailblazer. It's easy enough to find as a common, and it's a yoke dox that plays nice with our heroic enablers. Virtually nothing in an aggro deck can get through a 0-4 unassisted, much less within the first turns of the game. By the time they can get through a 0-4, the Trailblazer is likely a 1-5 or a 2-6. It seems good. Against midrange, there's a good chance we'll run into trouble with them having huge creatures that we can't get through. That's where an extra Aqueous Form comes in. You can also put in an extra Heliod's Pilgrim, as Tom Ross did, to better hit your Singing Bellstrike, or just add another strike directly. Use the strike to neutralize their Siege Rhino or Butcher of the Horde, or just use Aqueous Form to swing past it. One thing the midrange and control matchups have in common is the increased amount of removal to deal with. 2 Ajani's Presence and 3 Stubborn Denial will help you with that. Ajani's Presence saves you from anything with destroy or damage in the text. It even helps against end hostilities if you have the extra mana to pay for Strive and save a utility creature. As for Stubborn Denial, well, it doesn't take too long to get something up to 4 power in the deck. Having effective negate backup for 1 blue when you do is a good choice. We also have 2 Treasure Cruise in case you're fighting control or midrange and the game goes long. A bunch of your stuff is going to get countered or removed, and eventually you're going to run out of cards. You'll also have a decent number of instant spells. Treasure Cruise lets you use those cards to refill your hand. The last 2 sideboard slots are a pair of Erase. Erase is solid in the mirror match to say the least. Here's another hint. Courser of Crufix is an enchantment. Use this knowledge wisely. Erase can also target about half of the green-black Constellation deck. Taking down a Doomwake Giant for 1 white, pretty good value. And that's the deck. What do you think? I don't know about you, but I'd love to see this deck continue to be a thing. It'd be a nice feel-good moment for the little guy, you know? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions, concerns, anything at all really. As always, subscribe for the latest and most reliable Magic the Gathering information you could ever need. This is the Manosaurus, I'm Wedge, thanks for watching, we'll see you next time.